This is the Jared Brennan Disorder Podcast. Today is the final episode of the Bounce Novella series, and this is the theme music. And this is it. I feel a little bit sad about this maybe, but we're getting to the end of the Bounce Novella series of podcasts. And I've really enjoyed doing these. I was going to leave it a few days before I did the final part, because I'm not really pacing myself very well with these podcasts. I feel I'm kind of banging them out as quickly as I can. But I then realised this morning that I literally have like 2 more days of free mornings before the school holidays start. And it's going to be a real challenge to try and get more podcasts done. So I thought, I'll get this done today, and then maybe tomorrow I'll have time to do a couple of short stories as an episode, sort of like a standalone one that could be pushed out there to bridge the gap a wee bit. And then I'll maybe have to go to weekly instalments. But at least, if any new listeners come along during the summer, they'll have a nice backlog of episodes to tune into. There's the Bounce series. I have the bonus episode where we do the McDojo short story. And there's the Banbridge Library event, so there's a nice variation of things for people to drop in and check out. And, you know, it's a good few hours of entertainment, and it's free as well. And then so when I am able to get back to a more regular schedule, then perhaps I'll have built up a bigger audience. Who knows? Either way, I'm quite grateful of like 250 downloads so far, which doesn't sound huge. But at the same time, that's 250 people who maybe have not read any of my work. Well, I know a good portion of them have already read my work, but I'm now reminding them that I exist and that I have work that might be worth their interest. So that's good. Also, I'm just actually enjoying having a podcast. It's just a nice wee interest to maintain. I like reading out my work, and I like hearing what people think about it. So don't be shy, folks. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you've enjoyed the stories. Tell me if you'd like to hear more of something else, like if I should extend the chatty bits, talk more about creative writing. One of the things in the description of this podcast was that I would give away creative writing tips, but I haven't done a whole lot of that yet. Again, I think I'm warming up to the whole one-sided conversation thing. And I sense with each episode that I am doing that. There's more of a flow to how I'm speaking. I'm still saying but and and, you know, a little too often. But, you know, I'm trying to iron that out as I go along. Those last 3 were intentional. For now, let's get straight to the novella. And then I have a little surprise planned for the end of the podcast. In our last instalment, we covered chapters 19 to 21. So we're starting now with chapter 22 of the Bounce Novella by Jared Brennan. And it's called Light in the Window. I pull into the driveway. The stink of panic and sweat in my nose. Blue light illuminates the front room blinds in random flashes. Maria's watching telly. This time I don't catch her sitting. She opens the door before my foot hits the step, ushers me into the hallway. I turn to see her gently close the front door. Then she leans her back against it, barricading me in and the world out. Everything okay, Paddy? I really don't know. Maria nods. Is it acceptance? I couldn't be sure, but she's not angry. And I think she'll be patient with me. I take her in my arms and hold her tight. The dressing gown is so soft to the touch, like a child's security blanket. She's shivering. Are you cold? I ask. Yes. I kiss her cheek. What can I do for you, Maria? Take me to bed. I do. Chapter 23. Monday Blues. Maria's gone to work. Sean's left for tech. My time's my own. All I can do is waste it worrying. I've boiled the kettle 4 times and still haven't wet the tea. Managed to burn my toast. Surely it's only a matter of time before they come for me. I could go out and get the papers, I suppose. If getting arrested is inevitable, then why delay it? No, I'll leave it. Given the choice, I'd rather be arrested at home than on my way to the shop. There must be something I can do before it happens. A favourite movie I can watch, or a record I haven't heard in a few years. Food. It should be food. Something that's easy to make but nobody ever gets right, except for me. Omelette. I go to the fridge and pull it open, stir inside. I'm looking for eggs, cheese, ham, something else. I'm not hungry. Am I? The eggs, cheese and ham go back in the fridge. I close the door, open it and close it again. My stomach growls, but the thought of eating fills my mouth with sour puke spit. Something buzzes in my pocket and I almost shite myself. It's my phone, obviously. A text message from Sammy. He's asking if I'm alright. It'd be better if I didn't have to think about him right now. Not that I can blame him for tipping off a mate. I might have done the same myself. He's obviously feeling guilty about it too. Or he hasn't heard from Billy Lorimer and is worried. Jesus, I don't know. I'm sick of trying to figure things out. The phone goes back in my pocket. Sammy can read about it in the papers. We'll take it from there. The doorbell chimes. I answer it quickly. Peelers love to break doors down. No sense leaving that sort of hassle behind for Maria. Morning, sir. It's the tall cop. The one who must have discovered Billy on the walls. Plain clothes today? Off duty. Can I come in, please? I'm sure I look half daft, but I can't think of anything to say. The cop clears his throat. This won't be the visit you're expecting. Chapter 24. Non-uniform. You're one of those boys that still look like a peeler when you're in plain clothes. Yeah. Probably why I don't get a lot of undercover work. You know, most people don't call us peelers to our face. I shrug. Never really thought about it. What'll I call you? Chris is fine. After the saint? Yes. I'm a Taig. Most cops say Catholic. It's his turn to shrug. So, I get that you're not going to arrest me. What's the story then? The story is that we found a man beaten half to death on the walls last night. Getting to be a dangerous place. I have a feeling it might be a bit safer now. That's good. We got an anonymous tip-off about this man, Billy Lorimer. He'd have been picked up by some of my colleagues at some point today. Isn't that funny? If you lot were a little more efficient... Don't get cocky, Paddy. Fair enough. My colleague didn't get a good look at you last night. Bit embarrassing for him, but he forgot his contacts. I'm happy that we're talking about this more plainly. It was getting a little bit silly there. So what do you want from me? A promise that this is the end of it. Billy's only half dead. If he's to go all the way there, I want it to be of natural causes, preferably after a stint in prison. I don't want to kill him. Could have fooled me. I'm no vigilante. Last night was a lapse in judgment. It won't happen again. That's all I needed to hear. If push comes to shove, Maria will know where you were last night, right? After you left Castro's? On the couch with her, watching shite TV. That'll do well. Chris, the cop, stands up and looks at the table as if he's forgotten something. Then he scratches his head. Must be missing his hat. He'd be the worst undercover cop the PSNI ever produced. I'd love to see him make Chief Constable one day, though. You sure you won't have a cuppa before you go? No thanks. I've a bit of a drive ahead of me and I just want to get to my bed. I nod and see him to the front door. He reaches for the handle. Wait. Chris turns and smiles at me. What did I do to deserve this? I ask. You really don't know? Would I be asking if I did? Fair point. It's just that, with your son and all, I thought you might have figured it out on your own. I'm still lost, Chris. He laughs, leans into me as if he's about to whisper a secret, and kisses my cheek. Do you get it now, Paddy? I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid. I get it. Must be wild tough when you're Catholic and gay in the PSNI. Fair play to him. I wait at the door while he gets into his car, a flash BMW. His window is down, and as he turns the engine over, I take a notion that he might have an ABBA CD of his own. It'd be a laugh if Dancing Queen started pumping out of his speakers. It doesn't, though. He's got his radio tuned to BBC Radio Foil. Takes all sorts, I suppose. The end. And now you know. That's the whole story. That's what happened to Paddy. And hopefully you'll like the way it turned out. You'll think I made the right decisions or whatever. Endings can be tricky things. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop writing, where to stop writing, how it should be. I'm known as a writer of noir fiction, or really dark crime fiction. So a lot of times my stories don't go to particularly happy places. They've got a bleak feel all the way through, and then usually a poignant or bittersweet ending. But I think this is probably one of my more uplifting books, perhaps. I mean, the guy does get away with some pretty serious stuff, but at the same time, it's kind of justifiable. But it also raises some interesting questions about revenge and vengeance and how you should deal with these kind of things. And, I wonder if Billy Lorimer had passed away after his beating on the walls in Derry, would Paddy have been able to live with himself? It's a thought. I mean, this is a man who's well used to violence. He is a bouncer after all, and we've seen an ugly side to him as well. We saw him beating up two people. In fact, a wee group of spies and Billy Lorimer, and he didn't seem to have a whole lot of guilt about handing out these beatings. But then, this is a man that's from a different world than most of us, where he's been paid to protect the masses by beating the shite out of a few. And who knows what anybody might do if their son gets hurt. And the reality is that he could have been the one that died. So, all in all, I do think Billy Lorimer kind of got off easy. Although, if he does do time, it might not be easy time. So in my mind, that was the right ending. I think. That's the beauty of writing, You get to do what you think is right, but sometimes you get to do what you think is wrong as well. And allow people to draw their own conclusions about what they feel like they would have done in the same situation. Personally speaking, I probably would have killed the fucker. But that's just me. Now, with the story over, and us being just 14 minutes into the podcast, I feel like I might be shortchanging the listeners a little bit. I've gotten used to a slightly longer one over the last few episodes. So I don't want to leave you too quickly. Yesterday I had finished up the story early-ish because I wanted to leave a decent chunk to finish it on in the last episode, but the final chapters were actually quite short, snappy ones, which, if you want a creative writing tip, that's probably a good idea to do that in your work. If it is a longer work that is broken down into chapters, you'll find it helps the pace. People will race towards the ending a lot quicker if you keep those final chapters a little bit short. It gives a feeling of urgency to the work as well. So, I suppose we can say we've ticked the creative writing advice box. So, that's good. But I've been considering how stories can come in different forms. Yesterday I was talking about the fact that you can read my work, or now you can listen to this work. And how you get a slightly different angle, you get a different kind of emotion from it. And it got me thinking about how a lot of songs do that as well. In particular, you can find a lot of Irish songs that tell a story. They have that in common with country music, American country music, which you'll find a lot of crime fiction kind of stories in. But I remember this one song that sort of haunted me a little bit when I was younger. My dad used to listen to a lot of music in his car when he was driving, and when he was taking us on long road trips. And he had a habit of sort of replaying the same tape cassette over and over again because it was easier than hooking out another one. You just eject it, flip it over, play, eject it, flip it over, play, eject it, flip it over, play. And one of the tapes that my dad wore out was by a singer called Christy Hennessy. But one of the songs that really stuck in my memory was one that didn't really have any music. And I suppose you would call it acapello. And Christy's voice was just the only thing. And also it told a very, very sad story. It had the start, the middle, the end. It had crime, because there are bullets flying at one point. And I thought it would be kind of fun for me to do my own version of that, without a guitar or anything, just to see how telling a story in that form comes across in a podcast. Now, obviously it should be quite similar, but I don't have the same voice that Christy Hennessy has, so this is my version of it. The song is called Sheila Doran Loves Joe Kelly. And if you've heard it before, you'll know how sad it is. And if you haven't heard it before, you might want to get a wee tissue handy. Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly. Sheila Doran wrote this song. Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly. They walked out for 9 years long. Now one evening while they were walking out, a soldier passed on their way. Sheila Doran said to the soldier, "Do you remember me? I've come back, Sheila Doran, to see the places where we used to lay. I've come back to say I love you, and I'll never go away. No trains, no boats, no planes, no wars will ever make me stray. 'Cause I love you, Sheila Doran, and this time I'm home to stay." Now Joe Kelly caught the soldier, he caught him by the throat, and the more that Sheila shouted, the more that Joe said no. He beat the soldier all round the head, until the blood came out his eyes. Now Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, but Sheila Doran heard the cry. Well, it was written in the papers that Joe Kelly had got 10 years, and they talked to Sheila Doran all about the whole affair. Bad luck to all the soldiers, they're supposed to come and go away, but it was his green eyes shining that ever made me stray. Now one dark and cold November's night, in the Abbey Square, Sheila Doran had gone to see her man, and she had just left there, when a guard and a prisoner began to fight, and the bullets they began to fly. Now Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, but Sheila Doran was to die. Oh, she called a priest, come on over to my side, and bring yourself a fountain pen to write down these few lines. This child inside me breathing life, whether it be girl or boy. Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, but Sheila Doran had to die. Now it's written on the tombstone for anyone who cares to read of love's misfortune brought on by hate and fear. Bad luck to all the soldiers, bad luck to all their wars, and bad luck to all you fighting men, no matter what your cause. 'Cause Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, Sheila Doran wrote this song. Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, they walked out for 9 years long. Sheila Doran loves Joe Kelly, Sheila Doran wrote this song. There you are, a little bit of bonus material. I really do think that's a gorgeous song. It's definitely crime fiction if you ask me. It starts with a murder and then the stakes are up and Poor old Sheila gets shot when she goes to visit her man in prison. You know, one of those classic reasons for murder as well, you know, jealousy, love. They say most murders boil down to sex or money, right? So that one was sex, really. Now, well, I really like that song, and I think it's a really good crime fiction tale and whatnot, and it sort of suits the style of this podcast. I kind of don't want to leave you on such a bum note. I feel like it's I'd rather that this podcast be something that kind of gets uplifting towards the end anyway, which is why even when I'm reading the story, I save a little bit of room for a little bit of chat at the end, you know. And I feel like even though my books can have a bit of a dull note when they end, I usually try to inject a tiny bit of hope somewhere along the way. So I figure it's probably a good philosophy to add to my podcast as well. So I dug out another old song that I used to hear in my dad's car, usually when he was driving to work. Over the summer holidays, you know, when we didn't have a childminder or whatever, Dad would just take me to the scrapyard in Castlewellan where he used to work, and I heard a lot of really good songs then as well. We would sit in the front, and it would probably be too early for my dad to cope with all the crap that I was trying to talk about, so he would just pop on the radio and turn up the volume. And to be honest, that's a wee tactic I took from my dad and I use in the car myself whenever it's very early in the morning and my son wants to tell me about Minecraft or Dan TDM's take on some new dance move or some shit. Music is a nice salve, you know, a nice little barrier. Plus, I noticed that my kids actually sing some really cool songs now as well, so I'm sort of passing on a nice bit of art to them too. So I don't feel entirely guilty about using it just to keep them quiet. And it's not even really about not wanting to talk to them, it's just that I'm not a chatty person when I'm driving in the morning. So they wouldn't get the best of me anyway at that time. We do spend plenty of time chatting at home though, folks. I'm not a horrible father. Not completely, not all the time. But I'm getting beyond the point here and delving into parenthood and all sorts of shite. What I really wanted to do was sing another little song that I've heard done acapello. It's another Irish one, and the first time I heard it was the Dubliners singing it. And this one is called The Sick Note. It's also been called the Bricklayer's Song or Why Paddy's Not in Work Today. But it's definitely a cheery little number, even though there's a lot of calamity in it. But sure, comedy and tragedy, eh? That's what it all swings on. So, The Sick Note. Dear sir, I write this note to you to tell you of me plight. And at the time of writing I am not a pretty sight. My body is all black and blue, my face a deathly grey. And I write this note to say why Paddy's not at work today. While working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear. Now to throw them down from such a height was not a good idea. The foreman wasn't very pleased, he being an awkward sod. He said I'd have to cart them down the ladders in me hod. Now clearing all these bricks by hand, it was so very slow. So I hoisted up a barrel and secured the rope below. But in me haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that a barrel full of building bricks was heavier than me. So when I untied the rope, the barrel, it fell like lead. And clinging tightly to the rope, I started up instead. Well, I shot up like a rocket till, to my dismay I found, that halfway up I met the bloody barrel coming down. Well, the barrel broke me shoulder, as to the ground it sped. And when I reached the top, I banged the pulley with me head. Well, I clung on tight, though numbed from shock, by this almighty blow. And the barrel spilled out half the bricks, 14 floors below. Now when these bricks had fallen from the barrel to the floor, I then outweighed the barrel and so started down once more. Still clinging tightly to the rope, I sped towards the ground, and I landed on the broken bricks that were all scattered round. Well, I lay there groaning on the ground, I thought I'd passed the worst, when the barrel hit the pulley wheel, and then the bottom burst. Well, a shower of bricks rained down on me, I hadn't got a hope. As I lay there moaning on the ground, I let go the bloody rope. The barrel then being heavier, it started down once more, and landed right across me as I lay upon the floor. Well, it broke 3 ribs in my left arm, and I can only say that I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. So you can sort of tell where my dad's mind was when he was driving to work with that song playing. Another good one that I'll not do right now is Gold Watch Blues by Donovan. He played that quite an awful lot, and I enjoy that song too. I might play it another time, but it sounds better with a guitar accompaniment, and today I just wanted to do a couple of acapella ones. Just so, I just like the feel of that sort of raw vulnerability that singing without any instruments gives. And I think for 2 different reasons, those 2 songs have that, obviously the Sheila Doran one is a very emotional song, and it's quite bleak, and so the absence of music almost heightens the emotion in that song. You concentrate solely on the words. There's no real chorus or anything like that, rather than the Sheila Doran Loves Joe Kelly line, which is just repeated quite a lot. But that's hammering home that whole tragedy of the cruel twist of fate that had her child, the father of her child stripped away from her after she was found out for having an affair with a soldier, and then subsequently she gets killed. You couldn't get much sadder than that. And then, to be honest, if you hear it in Christy Hennessy's voice as well, which I do urge you to do, you can find it on YouTube, or just buy a Christy Hennessy CD, or download one of the tracks from iTunes or something. But it's a real beautiful, emotional kind of voice. He's more high pitched than me, and I wouldn't say it's whiny, but there's it's just an exaggerated vulnerability to his voice in this particular song, and I really, really like it. He sounds sort of older and frailer, and I wouldn't say weak. Vulnerable is probably the best word, and that's why I've ripped the arse and used it a whole bunch of times. But then, on the other side, there's the sick note, the bricklayer song, or Why Paddy's Not at Work. And that's kind of, I don't know, there's an Irishness to that song that's just fantastic, the hyperbole, how everything's so exaggerated, that it couldn't just be that he fell off some scaffolding and that's why he's not at work. No, it had to be a whole big convoluted story where he rigged up this pulley and barrel system to try and bring some bricks down from the 14th floor, and it launches him into the air, and he meets the barrel halfway up, and lo and betide, when he gets up there, then the barrel empties out and he's back down again. But that's still not the worst of it, because the bricks rain down on him, and then he lets go of the rope, and then the barrel falls on him. And it's like just disaster after disaster after disaster, which is kind of the Irish experience if you listen to a lot of the folk music or some of our history. And we're kind of like the guys that always get kicked when they're down, according to our take on life anyway. I'm sure people could argue with that. There are worse experiences out there naturally, but there is that whole romanticising of bad luck in Irish culture, and also of laughing at it. And that song typifies it really, really well. I don't think poor old Paddy with his 3 broken ribs and his broken arm is going to be in great shape or anything, and he's probably not laughing too much, unless he's made this whole story up. Because it's got that sort of feel to it, doesn't it, folks? It could be that this guy's giggling into a pint of porter as he's writing this note with his supposedly broken arm. Something to think about anyway. But I do love that Irish tendency to exaggerate, You don't see it that often in crime fiction from here. It can often be quite understated, depending on the writer, I suppose, but I do think we sort of try to get very close to reality. But one of my novels, which is out through Endeavour Media, is titled Fireproof, and it's kind of one of those, in my mind I see this novel as almost Tarantino-esque, or like it's got a comic book quality where the violence in it is so over the top that it's barely believable, The storyline is just so ridiculous that you kind of want to believe it, but you know it's impossible. And I think that sort of adds something quite different to that novel. It was actually the first full-length novel that I wrote. I wrote the novella, The Point, as my very first complete long-form work. But as far as novel-length work, Fireproof was the first thing I wrote, and it was mad. It's just crazy, this book. I was still sort of playing about with the idea of being a horror writer at the time, but it sort of became a mashup of horror and crime and comedy. Not even really horror, probably closer to urban fantasy. And I just let everything go. There was a real flow to that work. I never knew how to structure a novel. I didn't know what I was going to do at the end of this novel or anything. I just let it fly. I was entertaining myself while writing this one. It took a few years then to actually whip it into shape, so it actually became the second book to be published whenever I signed up with Blasted Heath, Wee Rockets being the first one. But Wee Rockets is sort of a more serious book, in that it's not got supernatural elements or anything like that. But I suppose you could argue that there are exaggerated elements, or at least at the time of writing it. You know, I wrote that book in 2007, maybe 2008. In fact, yeah, would it have been then? Might have even been earlier when I started it. But I set the book in 2007 because it was a very particular time in Northern Irish history where we had the PSNI and the Republican paramilitaries were supposed to be inactive, but Sinn Féin still hadn't signed off on the new PSNI. So basically it wasn't a done thing if you lived in a nationalist community like Beechmount in West Belfast to phone the police if there were crimes happening, because officially the community didn't support this police force. But also the vigilantes that were attached to Republican groups couldn't really be called upon either to dole out the punishment beatings that they used to do either. So in my mind there was like this sort of perfect storm for crime in which you could get away with murder. And then to make that even to make that point even more, I made it that the criminals in this novel were 14-year-old boys. And I thought, you know, I suppose this is kind of an exaggeration. It's like, how far can these wee guys go? How far can this crime get? But 10 years later, I'm hearing that I've long moved out of Beechmount. I used to live there for a few years, but I've heard that things have gone a bit downhill there. It's maybe just stuff that you hear when you don't live in a place. You know, things get exaggerated in Irish culture, and it may not be just as bad as people make out, but apparently crime there has gotten a whole lot worse since I moved out, so my book might have been more prophetic than an exaggeration. Who knows? I'm not claiming to be from God or anything like that. That would be a little bit arrogant. But it may be that I accidentally predicted the future when writing a book that sort of took a particular situation and tried to imagine the very worst case scenario. Which I suppose isn't that kind of what fiction is for? You know, it's not quite a history or a recount or, you know, a prediction of the future, but it is a social commentary in many cases, especially crime fiction. I think it might have been Declan Burke who said that it was the first draft of history, you know. Or, no, sorry, journalism would be the first draft of history, and you could argue that crime fiction is kind of the second draft. I don't know, I'll leave that up to smarter people to argue about. But I like the ring of it. So let me see. I feel now like we maybe have talked enough, because it's past the half an hour mark, and I've given you some songs, some stories, some opinions both on songs and stories. What I haven't done in the last few episodes though is plugged my own work. So allow me the time to do that now. Until I can get a sponsor, this is the best way to monetize the podcast, I suppose. And while I do enjoy doing it and it doesn't feel like a job, I am taking time away from writing or from doing other things that could bring in money. So it'd be kind of nice to see some sort of payment out of this. So, if you're so moved, why not buy one of my books? And at the moment, I'm most highly recommending that you purchase a copy of Disorder, my latest novel, which is available from noalibispress.com. You can order it wherever the hell you are in the world. And good old David Torrance, he doesn't charge you postage as far as I remember. It's quite easy. You can pay with PayPal and get it sent out to you. The advantage of buying directly from the shop as opposed to from Amazon or somewhere like that is that there's a good chance you'll get a signed copy if that's your thing. But now, if you don't want my scrawl to ruin your copy of the book, be sure to let Dave know that, and he'll send you a nice clean one, I'm sure. And if you don't mind waiting a couple of days, you can ask for a personal message in it as well, because I call into the shop quite regularly, and Dave will keep one on the shelf for me to dedicate it or whatever, and then he'll send it on from there. Other than that, I don't really have any reading recommendations or anything for you just today, because I did that yesterday and I haven't read any more books in the last 24 hours. TV wise, I haven't been watching much because my daughter keeps challenging me to FIFA matches, which is good fun. It's nice to spend time with my daughter that way and sort of promote that whole football's just not for boys thing. But she's a wee bit of a sore loser, so she's just going to have to get better at it though, because you can't take it too easy on these kids. They'll get beyond their station, you know. So I shall continue to beat her in FIFA, and whenever she gets bored of that, I'll go back to watching some decent TV and let you know what's good out there. The only thing that I've sort of half been watching is this documentary about a cult in America called Wild Wild Country. It's kind of mind-blowing, but I'm not too deep into it yet, so I can't really start raving about it. It might turn out to be a pile of pish. Thanks for listening. These are all sound as a pound. Keep her lit. And I'll chat to you again soon.